Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 11th, 2019 City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. My name is Chuck Sally, and I serve as chair of the board. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the other members of the board. To my far left is Josh Speed, then Gene Deakins, then Jenna Stevens. To my right, immediate right, followed by George Schaefer, and then finally John Gregory. I would also like to introduce the staff that will assist the board: Rachel Bailey, zoning administrator, and Hope Hasty, the deputy zoning administrator, and also assisting them is Andrea Wolf, the land use board coordinator. The board is charged with hearing applications for special exceptions, variances, and administrative appeals. All testimony is recorded for the record, and anyone wishing to speak will need to be sworn in and come to the podium to speak. No testimony may be taken from the floor. When you come to the podium, state your name and please speak clearly into the microphone because this meeting is being recorded. Applicants with cases before the board are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the board or staff regarding the case, and any member of the public may address the board in intervals of 3 minutes or 5 minutes if by a spokesperson for an established body or group of 3 or more. The applicant then has 5 minutes for rebuttal, and the board reserves the right to amend these limits on a case-by-case basis. Those of you who plan to speak must be sworn. So if you're here as an applicant or to speak in any case, please stand at this time and raise your right hand. Do you affirm or attest that the testimony that you will give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to Ms. Bailey.
Good morning. I first want to announce that there were 3 cases that were deferred by the applicant over the weekend. It is item number 9, 10, and 11 on the agenda for 2530 and 2520 Divine Street. Those cases will go forward in July. The consent agenda is used by the board to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the board or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed and considered during the meeting. The board then approves the remaining consent agenda items. The first item on the consent agenda this month is the approval of the May 14th, 2019 minutes. Item number 2, which is case 2019-0028 for 1622 Carousel Circle. It's a special exception to permit an in-home daycare. Item number 3, case 2019-0029 for 520 Green Street, special exception to expand a drinking establishment. And item number 4, case 2019-0033 for 6041 Garners Ferry Road, a variance to the buffer transition yard requirement.
Thank you. Just to be clear, the board is about to vote on 1622 Carousel Circle, 520 Green Street, and 6041 Garners Ferry Road. So if anybody here or on the board or in the audience would like any of those properties removed from the consent agenda, raise your hand now. In that case, I don't see anyone that wishes to do that. So these items will be considered in the consent agenda, and I will accept a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, subject to staff comments.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
The first item on the regular agenda is item number 6. This is 2019-0025 for 2222 Rembert Street. This is a variance to the maximum lot coverage requirement for a detached garage. If the applicant is present, they're welcome to come forward to the podium. They may not be here.
Do you want to Can we take a vote to defer that, and give the applicant time to arrive and move on to the next thing? I think that's,
Move it to the end.
do we need to, I don't think we need to vote on that. Let's just postpone this until later, and then if he doesn't come, we'll decide what to do then.
We'll
at the end.
revisit at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, we'll do it at the end of the meeting, so just remind me at the end of the meeting. Okay, so, then the next one, please.
Item number 7, it's 2019-0026. It's for 1205 Oak Street. Special exception to permit a parking lot in a residential district. I don't see the applicant for this one either.
Interesting.
Maybe we can move on to item number 8 and
Yeah, let's do that and see if they show up.
just for parking.
You cannot, may not speak from the floor. You have to come to the podium. Would you like to like to address the board? Please come to the podium. Just state your name and you can address the board.
Okay, fine, thank you. My name is Frank Houston. I am president of the Historic Waverly Community, and I signed up to speak in regards to that particular motion.
Mr. Houston, we're just postponing. We're gonna go to the next case just to give the applicant time to appear.
And
So we're
if
not.
the applicant doesn't appear, then we will take this back up at the end of the meeting, and then you'll have a chance to address this
Yeah,
again.
it's just pushing it to move to the next item, and then we'll revisit it
see.
before the end of the meeting.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right.
No worries.
Thank you.
Moving right along.
So item number 8 is case 2019-0027. It's for 6820 North Main Street, Unit O. It's a special exception to expand a drinking establishment, and I do believe the applicant is here, and she's welcome to come forward.
Hello, my name is Shakia Wilson. Do you want me to speak first? Okay.
Yes, so so the criteria for the special exception in your application, if you have them, it would be grateful if you just kind of go through those as to why you're, for your case and to present your case, and that way, we can keep the dialogue on the actual criteria of the special exception, if you don't mind. Thank you.
So just go ahead and
Yes,
read.
ma'am, go ahead.
Okay.
All
All right.
yours.
So I am the owner of Icon Bar and Lounge, and I'm basically looking to expand into the adjoining unit. This will allow us for more seating for our customers. It would also allow us to have space for live entertainment, such as live jazz, live bands, or poetry night. This will not have an adverse impact on vehicular traffic or vehicular and pedestrian safety because there is a very large parking lot that offers more than enough spaces to accommodate the entire plaza, as well as the extra customers that we're trying to make space for. We currently have no issues or adverse impact on adjoining properties. Music is played at a respectable noise level. We haven't had any complaints thus far. We have no added lights, glares, vibrations, fumes, odors, obstruction of air, or light, or litter. We have someone that cleans the parking lot at the close of business every night. No changes have or will be made to the aesthetic character of the area. Security is used as needed. Basically, on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, we have security outside. No one under 30 is allowed. We do not allow white t-shirts, hoodies, or athletic gear to be worn inside of the establishment. We will limit customers' intake of alcohol if there appear to be excessive drinking. We have a camera system in place as well. I'm able to see the inside of the business, what's going on at any time, any day, any hour. There are no other establishments near or around our current location with a similar type of special exception use. We fully fall within the zoning district description. There are no zoning overlay district goals or requirements. It is appropriate. Okay, describe how the proposed special exception is appropriate for its location and compatible with the permitted uses adjacent to and in the vicinity of the property. It's appropriate because our customers are in need of more space. I get asked every day, when are you all going to expand into the next unit? When are you going to? And I say I have to wait until I go in front of the zoning board. All of our current neighbors are patrons of our business. We have patrons from the Pepsi plant that's across the street, from the fire department that's behind us, from the neighborhood that's around us, and the other businesses adjacent to us. We currently do not adversely affect the public interest. The extra space will just give us the opportunity to further provide our customers with a relaxed, upscale, adult atmosphere.
Very good. Any questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a couple quick questions. How long has your existing business been in operation?
We've been open since about the middle of February.
So just recently.
Didn't we give a special exception for this?
We did.
Yeah,
Correct, for one unit, and now they are
need to
expanding.
expand, right.
Yeah, I couldn't
gotcha.
afford the second unit, but now that business is open and doing well, I'm able to now hopefully expand.
Very good. Thank you very much. Is anyone else here to speak in favor or against this application? I don't see anyone. Any further board discussion?
No.
Seems pretty straightforward to me. Just a expansion of existing business that we've already approved before, and they met the criteria for special exception then, so
Working.
no issues. Seems pretty good.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this request based on the applicant's testimony and written application and subject to all comments of staff.
A second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Pass. Okay. So that brings us,
All right, so
Back to the beginning
Erica just
again.
reached out to the applicant for number 6. They are on their way.
Mm-hmm.
So the applicant for number 7 is here, so we'll move forward with that if the board's all
Okay.
right. So item number 7, that's case 2019-0026 for 1205 Oak Street, special exception to permit a parking lot in a residential district. Just to clarify, on this case, it is not a standalone parking lot. It is a parking lot that is an extension of a proposed commercial office use that'll be accessed only through commercial parcels. The applicant is here, and they are welcome to come forward.
Good morning, I'm Charles Brooks, and the purpose of this request is for the construction of a small, somewhere 15 to 2,000 square foot building. And in order to make everything work, we need to have parking that is outside of the C3 lot that we're going to put the building on. I don't believe that this lot, the way it's shown, is exactly what we're doing. Are y'all looking at the same thing that I'm looking at? Mm-hmm. Okay, that subject property is RG2, but we're only using the back half of that. Does anybody have a pointer that I can? In other words, the building is going to go on that lot that fronts Gervais where you see the C3. And what we are doing is buying the back lot, which you show as subject property, and we're going to swap with the owner of the C3 property behind our property, which is 1203 maybe, Oak Street. And he's going to end up with a 46 by 80, 46 by 135-foot lot, and we're going to end up with a 48 by 135-foot lot. So there'll be two parallel lots side by side. So we're only using the back half of that lot for this parking. We're not using the front part, which fronts on Oak Street. Is that pretty clear?
Yeah, you're going to take that rectangle and make it into two squares, basically.
There you go.
Yes, ma'am, yeah. Right down where that alleyway goes up from Gervais Street, kind of the middle of that'll split the property line.
Right.
And when you say back half, you mean the west of those two parcels?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
When you say you're going to be using the back half, do you mean the one on the west side?
The western back half. So we're not going to be entering or exiting onto Oak Street at all. And I don't know if the community understands that. I see.
So
Houston.
that front lot, I'm looking at your diagram now that says 82 feet from Gervais
Somebody
Street.
switch to that diagram where I can see what he was talking about.
Right there.
Back up, okay. Back where you see that parking is the back part of 1203 and 1205. 1203, as it exists right now, is a C3. 1205 is RG2, and we'll be using the back half of that.
So you're creating, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parking spaces on that back.
On the back half of that RG2.
Okay.
And to the far right, in other words, to the right of that 1205, all that is existing parking to the Richland School District 1 building, which is also RG2. And to the back of it, in other words, I'm surrounded by RG2 on that half lot, and it's all being used as parking, paved, improved parking.
Do you have your application with the requirements for the special exception? Perhaps you could just run through those requirements for us as you fill them out when you made the application for what's required in order to get this.
Okay, starting with number 1, permission to use RG2 as a commercial parking area for 2225. And I think that's what I just laid out before the panel, that we'll be using the back half of that 1205 Oak Street. The second item, parking will be behind the proposed building faces Gervais Street at 2225, and will require 7 parking spaces. All unloading or loading or parking will be to the rear, the northern end of that proposed building, which that layout shows. All the surrounding property is either vacant, commercial, existing parking lot, which is RG2, and one seldom used small warehouse on the corner of Gervais and Oak, known as 1229, which is the warehouse for Verve decorating people. It's it's C3. There are no buildings on any of the adjoining lots with the exception of the Verve building on the corner. Most of that property along there is owned by the First Nazarene Church, First Nazareth, and potentially would be used for parking, if they can get past. It's all C3 for the most part. And as you can see on this layout that's before us right now, that improved parking there for the school district is all RG2, so I'm not really asking for anything that's not already there. And since I'm not entering Oak Street or exiting onto Oak Street, I'll be doing it on Gervais Street through a 24-foot right-of-way for that purpose.
On that sketch that you provided, that driveway, is that where that right-of-way is?
That includes that 10-foot,
Includes that
9-inch
10-foot Right, but it's larger than that.
alleyway. That's a no-man's alley, and I will have access to it, and Verve will have access to it because we're the two adjoining property owners, but it dead ends into that C3 property. So I'm just capitalizing. As a matter of fact, if I couldn't use it, I couldn't even do the project. It's just not enough land. Let's see what else we got here. The way I got it laid out, the only thing I'm asking for is the use of that back property. Everything else meets code. I'm not asking for any other exceptions of any kind that I'm aware of, or maybe stand to be corrected on anything.
So, I guess number 4, I don't know if you did, the proposed building will have, you said it will have a low impact on the traffic and use, as it's only 2,000 square feet. It appears that, so the only access will be on Gervais Street, in and out. So it's, I guess you're proposing then basically a right turn in, right turn out access driveway?
Exactly. And, we cannot ever, none of us could ever say what a building is going to be used for 20 years from now, but our purpose is to build it as a law office and a real estate office. My son is a one-man law office, and I'm a one-man real estate office. And not typical real estate, as some of you all know. I'm just really a private investor, and I could count. Nobody ever comes to see me. I put it that way. So I don't know why I need 7 parking spaces except for code purposes. And so as long as we're in that building, there's not going to be very many cars anywhere. Just our own 2 cars and the occasional client that might come in. So it's going to be very, very minimal impact on anything. And the only reason I need it is just to meet code. I could design it to be parked, without that lot. I just, have to have 7 parking spaces. That's the only purpose. I do know that.
So I see you got kind of combined 5 and 6 together. There, do you want to kind of go through those? 5 being why the proposed special exception does not create a concentration or proliferation of the same or similar types of special exceptions.
I don't even know how to interpret what that says.
Well, I think that the idea is not, a special exception. I don't think is supposed to, in this case, create a lot of different, a lot of the same stuff going on in the same area.
If
that would
read what you're
pertain
trying to
the-
say to me, there isn't any other opportunities, I don't believe, that someone would ask for the same thing I'm asking for, because of the uniqueness of this backing up to that RG2. If you go to the left going towards town, all that is C3, and it backs up all to that same parking lot that the school district has. So there's not really going to be another opportunity for this request to come before your panel, I don't believe. Is that answer that
that works
question?
for me.
I don't think we're going to have much of an impact on anything
And then
now or in the future.
So let's talk about the next one then. The proposed special exception is consistent with the character and intent of the underlying district as indicated in the zoning district description with any applicable zoning overlay district goals and requirements.
I don't see a change in character because what's back there is the school district parking, and we're just going to have 7 parking spaces that will potentially be used on the back of that lot. Is not going to have any impact on Oak Street.
You mentioned in your application that the proposed building will meet all requirements for the Waverly Historic District, and the project and surrounding property is largely vacant commercial, which butts to the school district one property. So that's your intent, that you will meet all, so the plan development will meet all of the requirements of the overlay district?
Right. In other words, the only thing I know about the overlay is just what the building is going to look like. Is that correct? And we're going to make it, fit the neighborhood. Number 8, I write that I believe I have the support of the Waverly Property Owners Association, and upon receiving a letter where they do not support me, comes as quite a shock to me, because I had met with Frank Houston, who's in the audience, and he assured me throughout our meeting that we would have the support. So the fact that we don't, I don't quite understand what the change in heart was, but that's not my point. My point would be that if their opposition is represented by the letter I got, then there's maybe 8 people that would be against it, and 2 or 3 of those 8 people are married to each other, so there's maybe 4 or 5 families that might be against it. Now, I agree.
I don't know whether that really is germane. I think that question is really more about, will that special exception adversely affect the public interest? I think that's really the gist of it. So that's what we've got to decide as a board, is whether or not that it's not a popularity contest. It's a matter of, does this development adversely impact, the neighborhood?
I understand, and my position is that it would not, purely by the fact that I'm surrounded by parking that is already and still is RG2. So I'm not asking for anything that is not already there. So I don't know what else I could add to it. And there's no hard feelings with me in the community. If they object and y'all rule against me, it is what it is. So it's not the end of the world.
So the lot appears to be what are the dimensions of that lot?
The proposed lot.
This commercial lot.
The one
existing
I'm gonna build
commercial.
on, or the one that the cars
Existing commercial lot
the commercial lot.
that fronts on Gervais, yeah.
It's fronts 48 by 80, and it backs up to a C3 that is 26 by 104.
Does that 48 include the
It does not.
alleyway?
That'd be 58 feet 9 inches, including the alleyway.
Gotcha. So it'd be hard to do anything on that property at that
It's
size.
really an impossible
In that thing.
scenario, just about. I don't see it as developable, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was just thinking, Chuck. If it's only 26 feet wide.
I mean, I'm putting a minimal building on there, and it's all the building I want, which attracted me to it. I'm not building anything I don't need, that's for sure.
Is that right? Is it only 26 feet wide?
Well, no, but with the driveway, it's 26 feet because of the driveway is taking up additional space. So see that's the alley, that's the new driveway. It gets to the back.
No, you might be reading that wrong.
Well,
gotta
The
exit.
narrow commercial lot is quite small. I don't know the dimensions 100%, but that commercial
Not
and
exactly the greatest
subject
architectural
residential or
work I've
narrow.
ever seen, George, but I think I can
Well,
understand.
Here's what I'm thinking. RG2 residential district, what do you have, a 5-foot minimum side building setback? Is that right? Okay, so you have a 5-foot minimum side building setback, and if you have a 26-foot wide lot, you're left with about 16 feet of possible buildable area at the most. So I think that's important to consider as we're discussing this. it's a residential zone property, but it's effectively unbuildable.
Okay, well, let's do this. Let's hear what everybody else has to say. Thank you very much for your presentation. Would anybody else in the audience like to speak in favor or against this application?
Morning.
Morning.
Once again, thank you. My name is Frank Houston. I'm the president of the Historic Waverly Neighborhood, and I would like to thank the zoning board for allowing me to stand before you, also Mrs. Bailey, and also respect to Mr. Brooks. I have printed my statement so that I will be on point at all times. But I want you to know that the opposition that we oppose is not against a person, Mr. Brooks, whom I have known for many years, but it's about the protection of the Historic Waverly Protection Area Guideline Overlay granted in 2016 by the City of Columbia Planning Department. This overlay gives the neighborhood oversight and protection over its neighborhood. There are two types of real estate, I should say, in the Historic Waverly neighborhood. They are commercial and residential. There are no loopholes for special exceptions or standalone exceptions on our map. It is zoned for commercial business purposes or residential for individuals and family daily living. The sale of residential property is highly regarded and regulated. Mr. Brook and his son and I had conversation a few weeks concerning the building of his law office on Gervais Street, on the Gervais Street parcel. But it was not mentioned in that conversation the request that was made to convert residential space into parking space. The applicant has applied for a special exception for parking space on which it is zoned residential parking at 1205 Oak Street. We, the resident, some of whom are here with me today, of the Historic Waverly neighborhood, strongly oppose granting special exception for a parking lot at 1205 Oak Street, which is zoned residential. Granting this special exception will have a negative effect on the Waverly neighborhood, and not only the Waverly community, but surrounding neighborhoods, wherein other commercial businesses may want to convert residential real estate into parking lots. This request for a special exception would create a contradiction and or a proliferation of some of the same or similar types of special exception use. This concentration can be and may be detrimental to the development of the area in which the special exception is proposed to be developed. We cannot allow businesses to change the landscape of our neighborhood by using loopholes, expressions such as standalone or parking exceptions to change our neighborhoods. There are ample parking space in the block of Gervais Street between Oak and Pine that can be marked for parking by the City of Columbia for his clients. This request has been made in other neighborhoods, such as the Wills Garden, with the Master Cleaner's property on Blossom Street in Saluda near the corner. the zoning board has made a precedent that it is not possible to convert residential into parking space. So we are asking the same, that you use the same precedent, not only for Waverly, but for other communities also. It is a matter of protecting the integrity of our community. It's a matter of principle. We are joined today by other communities in a correlation of communities for support of each other. We have with us today members of the Wills Garden community, Lower Waverly community, the Lion Street community, and again, members of the historic Waverly community, which is here with us also.
Thank you.
Again, I want to reiterate that this is not about the person, Mr. Brooks, but about the overlay protection of historic Waverly granted to us in 2016 by the City of Columbia for the protection of our neighborhood. Thank you, and I don't know if anyone else wishes to speak from Wills Garden or any of the other community areas. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Houston.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, lady and gentlemen, my name is Kit Smith, and I am president of the Coalition of 5 Points Neighborhoods. There are really just 2 points I'd like to reinforce that Mr. Houston made very clearly to you. One is to do sort of a back up and do a flyover of what we're facing in these neighborhoods around 5 Points. There are 2,500 rental properties just in that box. Waverly is not in the box, nor I don't think Lion Street and maybe some other neighborhoods, Melrose, are not in there. The predominance of those dots are student housing. So we have a real estate tilt situation going on. And the camel's back is about to be broken. So we are fighting as hard as we can to hold on to the residential integrity of our neighborhoods. A decision to convert another residential property to parking would be one more straw on that camel's back. We appeared, I think it was before you, to stop the conversion of a duplex backyard to a parking lot for the property at Master's Cleaners some time ago in the Wells Garden neighborhood, because we know that there's a desperate need for parking in this area if it's going to develop. So the main thing, the point number one, is this is a dangerous precedent that we are really fighting, because if you do this for one property on Gervais Street, what happens next door and on up the road? The second point is we need a plan. I'd love to see law offices on that strip. Hardin Street is starting to develop and taking off going north from 5 Points. There are developers working for a hotel that you may have read about. Parking is an issue there. They are working with the MLK community to develop that strip going up to Gervais on the east side. And they're working with the neighborhood there to develop some parking that would fit into the neighborhood. And I know that we need desperately a plan for Millwood Avenue development. It's starting to take off. This has been a neglected strip by the city. There needs to be a comprehensive plan for how we're going to develop that part of Gervais Street from the railroad trestle to Millwood Avenue and maybe even on up past Lion Street. How are we going to park cars, and how are we going to support egress and ingress and pedestrian traffic there? We got 700 students living on that corner, and they have a hard time getting across the street to get down to 5 Points. They cross the street at all matter of hours of the night very dangerously. So we are working with Old Shandon and a number of other neighborhoods to ask the city to come up with a comprehensive plan for how that area is going to develop without detriment to the neighborhoods. So I would ask you to deny this, but I think Mr. Brooks' idea is great. Love to see a law office in there, but not at the expense of the neighborhood that would set a precedent to take away the residential integrity that we're trying to preserve.
Well, let me ask you a question. So how does it necessarily take away from the residential integrity if he builds an office building on the
The
front?
office building does not. The parking conversion of a residential lot to commercial, even by special exception, is a dangerous precedent. We don't know what's going to go in there in the future once the special, I know you can tie a special exception to the use, but we don't know what would come in the future. So we do think there needs to be a plan for how you're going to develop that strip. If you'll notice on the map, all of those lots were residential at one time. There were steps going up to them, and they've been wiped out. So that's okay. I mean, it's Gervais Street, maybe that should be commercial. It should be, if it's not going to be multifamily or something in there. Or another, we don't want another student housing project, I tell you that. But it's...
But this is not a student housing project.
No, it's not. But
And it's not, it's a vacant residential lot. It's not likely to be developed as residential.
it can be if we preserve it and come up with a plan to encourage development in that neighborhood. We're desperate to hold on to the housing that we've got. Once a use goes in that has a negative externality, that's a zoning term that means, you're not getting apples off the tree, you're getting limbs and leaves, then it diminishes the value of that property for that use. And we're seeing that throughout this area. Once 6 kids move in next door to you, you don't want to live there anymore. So once a law office and a parking lot goes into that residential house, what happens to the lot next door to it? So nobody's going to want to build a house there.
Well, the lot behind it is the Richland County Administrative Building, and then, the lot next door to it is a warehouse.
And I would just submit that if you want that to become a commercial parking lot area, zone it. Don't fool us by saying it's residential and has historic protection and then grant a special exception.
Well, that's allowed under the zoning ordinance.
If it doesn't have a detrimental impact, there are standards for that, and we're arguing that it would have a detrimental impact because of the precedent it would set in the neighborhood. There are tons of properties that are owned in that neighborhood now by developers who want them to become parking. The church being the main one. The church doesn't have enough parking, they're desperate for it. Once you grant a special exception for one, I think it makes it much more difficult to not grant a special exception for another with the same arguments. What harm is it going to do? It's not developable. Let's make it developable for residential and protect this historic neighborhood. Look at MLK. Our most historic black neighborhood in this city, white student housing, being bought up every day by what we call predatory developers for a small amount of money, converted for 6 students, and
Okay,
then
thank you very much for your testimony.
I appreciate your questions and your time.
My name is Jim Daniel, and I'm a real estate broker with Catawba Properties. A couple of things. I agree with their concept that if you cross the line and start going into residential property for non-residential uses, then you set examples all over the city. But another issue I'd like to make is this is a historical residential lot. I have a client right now who has asked me to identify properties like this in a particular neighborhood with the purpose of buying and putting on small houses. 1,000 square foot house, 1,200 square foot house that would fit on a lot like this. Celtic built 2 houses on similar lots like this on Laurel Street. Sold them for $300 and some thousand. Different neighborhood, but the lots there were less than 30 feet wide. So you'd have to get some special exceptions. But I have somebody having me actively looking for small lots to build small homes on in another neighborhood because they are historically resident. They were residents at one time. Under the present city zoning, if you tear something down or want to rebuild, you got to have at least a 50-foot lot. I just recently was involved in a development like that where the perfect use of that property was a 40-foot or 30-foot lot with small homes. But under the present regulations, when they tear down that project, it's going to have to be 50-foot lots unless they go with townhouses. So that is a buildable lot. You can work with the city on that, I would say, and I'm actively trying to find lots in another neighborhood that are historically small lots, and the concept is to build small houses on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
Good morning. My name is Sylvie Desso, and I'm with the Waverly Neighborhood Association. I want to mention that, well, I will reiterate some of the points that you heard already. And first, I applaud Mr. Brooks for his willingness to invest in the neighborhood and bring a law office. And definitely having something built on Gervais Street will be an improvement. But having parking on residential lots is definitely not an improvement. And you say, well, this parcel is not developable. Actually, it may be for a building small enough. And the other thing, if we look across Oak Street, all this property is empty. It's zoned residential. And the owner, which is a church, wants desperately to use that as parking. If you grant this special exception to make 1205 Oak Street a parking, then of course the next meeting, the church is going to come in and say, you did that for 1205. We want all this residential land that we own on the other side of Oak Street to become parking. And that would be an issue for the residents. Mr. Brook doesn't live in the neighborhood. Neighbors do. And we are basically under a lot of pressure from institutions to, well, basically have less houses and more of everything else that's not residential. But if neighbors live there, it's because they want to live there, and we want other people to live there. So these are some of the reasons why I'm asking you not to grant this special exception. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Would anybody else like to speak that hasn't been heard? Mr. Brooks, would you like to come back to the podium?
Thank you. I want to make one more comment, and I would ask Ms. Bailey to correct me if I'm misrepresenting anything. But as I understand it, there is a plan for the future for that area, particularly that strip that I'll be building on and the property behind it, which is currently RG2. As I understand it, the urban plan, and I'm not sure if that's a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, is that that property is going to be converted to C1 anyway. So, you know, the whole point might be just incidental, whether it's me, if you grant it for me, or down the line, it's going to be end up being commercial anyway, light commercial, nothing out of the way. So I just want to make sure that the panel understands that that seems to be in the works anyway.
Rachel, can you give us a little bit of clarification on that, please?
So I believe he's referencing the future land use plan that the city adopted several years ago. It's not a regulatory document, it's a guiding document, and it does show parts of Gervais, and it does include that narrow residential lot within kind of an activity center corridor, which is a mix of residential and some light office institutional uses. So I do not have the land use plan with me, but that's just the basic rundown. But again, that's just kind of a guiding document.
Would that be the same plan that the Planning Commission would use?
It's discussed when we look at rezonings. So, but again, as for any future remapping, I can't say for sure whether that would remain residential or commercial.
Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about the required parking spaces for this office? I know some of the neighborhoods that we talk about, or the Vista or other places, get 50% reductions and things
This
like
is
that.
outside of the city center overlay. The DD allows for a 50% reduction. You can pull from on-street parking. This is within the design preservation. There are no parking reductions unless it's a landmark building. So with this, it's the set 3 per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area.
How about some of the spaces on Gervais Street? Any chance any of those can count towards the 7 he's being asked to provide?
Those would not count towards the off-street. Should a variance request come before you all, that's something that may be discussed, but just for our basic off-street parking requirement, we're not able to pull from the street within these districts.
Mr. Brooks, is there any other way you can configure your proposed site plan to contain your spaces on the existing parcel you're planning to build on? I thought I heard you mention earlier that you might be able to do something without this additional lot behind it.
Well, anything I do would require me cutting the building from 2,100 square feet, down to probably 1,300 square feet, which would pretty much defeat the project.
That doesn't sound good. I'm just thinking, because of the fact that you, the kind of real estate that you do, you don't have very many visitors, and because your son would be operating a one-man law office, maybe the compromise here is it might be more appropriate to approach the board for a variance to parking requirements or something to that effect to avoid encroaching into this rear lot that does appear to at least have some opposition from the public. I don't think with these existing I think the spaces on Gervais, even though they can't count towards you, I think they help. So I'm not convinced that you can't do what you want to do on your lot fronting Gervais and not encroach into this lot, maybe with a little assistance from the board or the city, or I just wonder if there's a creative way to explore that. Have you considered that?
I have. I've developed probably 20 different variations of what conceivably could work, but I would say that it would require a soft heart on the board somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 3 parking spaces to make that work. Whether that comes on the street or just, just a variance. I don't know the proper terminology, but I would be remiss if I said it's not conceivable.
It seems to me you may not need 7 spaces, and that's the whole reason that you need
I don't
to encroach in this lot.
need them, but if I could build what I need to build and not have them, that would be fine too. And to be candid, there was some question as if I should apply for that first rather than this, and it was just a decision made to do this first, and either way, I end up in front of y'all.
But in that case, we wouldn't be encroaching into the residential neighborhood, and we might could grant you some relief from parking spaces that, at least in my opinion, that you don't need. Seems like that might be a good compromise.
One thing I'd like to point out is that you've got 2 lots that are very long right now, and one of those lots is not likely to be developed at all unless they're combined. So essentially, what you're probably going to have to do to actually develop this is somebody's going to have to combine those 2 lots as a residential, and what Mr. Brooks is proposing is to divide them and still have 1 lot that would be used for residential and 1 lot that would be contiguous to the back of his office building and be used for parking. So I don't really believe that there's a really net loss of ability to build a residential structure there, and I believe
Well,
that Jim's
I
client
have that
could,
property under contract.
he could have that, he could buy that. He still has a more developable piece of property now. If his client wanted to buy a lot in the Waverly District on Oak Street, it's more developable as a square than it is as a long, skinny rectangle. So I believe that this is actually a pretty clever solution that does absolute bare minimal of impact into the Waverly Overlay District. Because of the circumstances that you have here, you have a lot that's a commercial lot that fronts on Gervais Street that is too small to develop and will likely never be developed. You have a residential lot behind that is too narrow to be developed and will never be developed. And so this plan takes that and creates one residential lot that can be developed as a residential structure, and then on the back, not fronting on any street, but contiguous to the commercial property, is a small parking lot with 6 to 7 parking spaces on it that would be part of I think it's a brilliant design. I think it's absolutely the best design he could have done for being able to develop the commercial lot on the front, and it has the least impact on the Waverly Overlay Design District that it could possibly have.
You know, one thing, Chuck, I think I agree with you in principle on most of those points, but one thing that sort of swayed me was Mr. Daniels' testimony, because I stated it earlier that I didn't believe that this lot was a buildable lot, but Mr. Daniels' been doing this a long time and certainly knows a lot more about real estate than I do, and he testified that it is a buildable lot. And I think if you cut it in half, I mean, we already know it's very narrow. I would just dispute the point you made that if you cut it in half that Celtic or some like builder could still build on it. I don't think they could. I think you need the depth.
It's 2 lots. It's that lot and that lot. It's not one. This is the one I'm talking about. See that skinny little lot right there?
So we have 2 parcels.
Right. And
thought it was
you're
one
still
parcel.
going to have 2 parcels. No, it's 2 parcels.
So there are 2 commercial parcels and then the residential parcel.
The one we're discussing is 1 parcel.
The subject property is 1 parcel. It's residential. Applicant has proposed that he intends
What
to
he's
do.
doing is he's going to take this long, skinny lot, and then he's going to divide it in half, and now he's got this square lot and a perfectly developable lot still on Oak Street.
I see what you're saying, but my point
That
is,
lot is not, if you took the area of that lot, it would equal what he's doing behind him.
Can I clarify?
And it's not developable.
something? Please. So I know the applicant discussed changing up lot lines, but I do want to say no plat has been approved and land development has not signed off on the new subdivisions, so it's hypothetical.
And he's got some trees to worry about, too.
Right now, the subject property is 1 residential parcel.
So, you know, I'm sorry, you have to wait until you can come to the podium. Well, yep. So you arrived late. Would you come to the podium, please? So we have this. All right. So look at
Tell me
it.
what y'all are looking at.
Okay. All right. So so you have 2 lots, a very narrow, skinny lot,
It's a lot
and
of
then
record. It's a lot of record
it's a lot of record.
with a separate tax number.
That's my understanding. That's a separate tax number. That's 2 lots that are right there together.
And the one above it is another same lot.
Right.
Owned by the same owner.
Right.
With a separate tax map number. Now, what is this?
What he's planning on doing there is, so he's got these 2 lots. Now he's going to put a line in the very middle where see that alleyway? If you take that alleyway and put a line in the middle and go straight to the back, now he's got 2 perfect squares.
I don't remember that being in the application.
It's not.
The application dealt with that whole lot being part of this empty lot on Gervais Street. It
Go to
didn't
the
say
site plan,
anything
please.
about cutting it in half.
Let me clarify something. The subject property is the parcel that is shown as the subject property. That is what it was for. The applicant testified today that he only intends to use the back half of that parcel for actual parking purposes. The parking's not going to be right on Oak Street. It's not going to have an entrance or exit onto Oak Street. He's only intending to use the rear parcel. It does not make me comfortable that we are completely discussing where new lot lines are going to be drawn, just because the land development administrator's not here. We don't have a plat before us. But the testimony of the applicant is at least that parking will just be on the rear of that parcel, and that's what the record will reflect as well. But the subject property is that 1205 Oak Street.
Relative to that, I'd like to ask a question. So if we approve this special exception today, the applicant could develop the entire property for parking as long as it did not have access off of Oak Street?
Unless we restrict it.
I'm not going to own the other half.
I'm just asking.
So, yeah, let's not get into ownership here, but he has testified that parking would be on the rear part, so that would be a part of the record. And then also there are requirements that are within section 17, 3A, that screening of the lots has to be established. They'll have to screen along Oak Street, and there can be no curb cut on Oak Street. So it's going to be blocked off from that actual residential street as well. So the only ingress and egress can be off of the Gervais Street through those two commercial parcels.
Well, I have a question, Mr. Brooks, and it's also relying on your testimony, and it's sort of building on what Gene asked you earlier. You did say when you in your earlier testimony that you could do the project without using this lot. Could you tell me what you
I
meant?
can't say that I can because.
But you said that's what you said in your testimony.
That I control what you would approve, and I don't know what you would approve, so I don't know.
I guess what I'm saying is when you said that, what did you mean when you said that?
What I mean is that instead of building a 2,172 square foot building, I could build a 1,300 square foot building.
Okay.
And have less parking requirements, but also would still need, out of 5 spaces, I would still need 2 to get a parking variance somewhere.
So what you meant is that you could do the project, but it would require a building of a smaller square footage.
A project could be done, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I would do it because I haven't. What I'm presenting and asking for is to build a particular size building. I prefer not to build a smaller building than it, and likely would not. But is it possible for somebody to do it? I would say that it's possible. Probably not me. I'm not sure if you're talking about ownership. I'm only going to own the back half of that lot where I'm parking cars on. The other half is going to still be retained by the guy that owns Verve. So I won't ever be able to encroach on that other portion of that lot.
All right, I need a clarification then. All right, so there are 2 lots shown behind the building.
2 RG2s.
RG2 lots. And the subject property shown on this map is only one of those lots. The other lot is not shown as part of the subject property, but it still exists. Is that correct?
It does, sure.
And you have your intention is to combine those 2 lots and divide them in half. Is that what I'm hearing you say? So that one half would face Cook Street and be divided by the center line of the alley, and the other half would be directly behind your lot, would be the same width as your lot, and go all the way to the top of the where the black line is shown on that hatch mark.
The black line, yeah.
Yeah.
Those other 2 lots are not part of the development.
So it essentially, leaves a fully developable RG2 lot that is not encumbered by, that would not be encumbered by, and you would agree not to have that lot as part of the special exception, only the lot, the area right behind your office building that's shown on the site plan that you provided.
I would not go beyond the black line.
I would
Heavy
say
black line.
that you would agree that you would not go beyond the site plan that you presented to the,
Well, I think it's the same thing.
to be limited to the area provided by the site plan.
Well, Chuck, if I may, let's back up a second. I don't see where that leaves a fully developable RG2 lot, because half of it is commercial, is C3 zoning. Is that correct?
Both of those are RG2.
Why is one designated as C3, the skinny lot, right behind where the
On
building?
Gervais Street, it is one commercial lot, a second commercial lot, and then a residential parcel.
Right.
The other residential behind that is not part of
C3,
this
so it's the color
application.
code that's throwing me off. So the red is,
The
okay.
subject property is 1205,
No, look.
Correct.
and then the C3
The
below
ones
is
heading
1203.
towards Gervais Street.
Right.
See, if we did,
I see that. So I stand corrected. I now understand that the lot between the RG2 lot and the lot owned by the applicant is zone C3 as well.
Correct. That's the only way he's able to apply for this special exception. In a residential district, to have a parking area on a residentially zoned parcel,
Has to be
you can
committed.
only access it through a commercial project.
Yes.
Subdivisions of a lot
Right.
has to go to planning commission, not to you guys, right? Or staff. So what Mr. Brooks is gonna take the sliver of a lot.
Can you come to the microphone, Mr.
sorry.
Daniels?
I think this matter needs to go to planning commission if it's a subdivision of a lot, because you're taking a lot that's, well, let's just say 30 feet wide by 100 feet deep, and you're making a lot that's 30 feet by 50, which stays residential, and then you have a lot that's 30 by 50, which is contiguous to what Mr. Brooks wants to buy on Gervais Street, and that becomes his commercial right. Is that what's happening? And doesn't this go to planning commission?
It would not go to planning commission. A subdivision is staff review, and that's why I said we don't have the land development administrator here. We cannot be drawing property lines. This is not a plat review.
But is this a Board of Zoning appeal matter?
They can talk about a front or a rear of a property. Drawing property lines and splitting a property is not within their purview, but discussing the rear
Only
portion
the, only,
of a
only
parcel
the,
versus a
right,
front
only
is-
to the extent that the board needs to understand the intention of what was going to happen. So I think that I apologize earlier, I misspoke. I thought that both of those lots were residential and one of those lots is actually commercial. So,
We own Oak Street or Gervais Streat?
Oak Street, there are two lots facing Oak Street. One is commercial and one is residential. I thought they were both residential.
I don't think that's correct. Well, you've got the alley, you've got the warehouse on the corner, you've got sort of an alley that runs there behind the warehouse, and then you've got two residential lots owned by the same person from Charleston, and then the one owned by the school district.
The zoning map is correct. It's a commercial parcel, a second commercial parcel, which is quite narrow, which is at the top of, it tees off at the top of that alley.
Right.
And then the subject property, which is residential. The
Right.
chair had misspoken and had moved one more lot past that to the residential. That is not part of
Right.
this.
The commercial strip is that small alley that runs behind the Verb warehouse. But he's not buying that, because that's an alley, I think.
Yeah,
What is shown as red on this map is commercial. The brownish is residential.
Can I just summarize? I think what I understand, Mr. Brooks' intent, if you look at the two commercial properties that are on Gervais, one is where the warehouse is, one is what he wants to develop, then you have the alley in the middle of that. He is only talking about a rectangular piece he wants to develop that goes on the western side of the alley back north that would cover the C3 lot to the north and also the RG2. The issue is those two parcels are owned by different property owners, so he's going to be doing a potential property swap to basically own the back half of those properties so that the new property owner would own the front half. Correct. So that's the intent, I believe, behind all this. Is that correct? Yeah.
Correct.
So there's a few issues trying to be handled here at once, is the way I see it.
Yeah, the case before us today is not about where lot lines are going to be drawn. The case is, can parking be on a residential? That is all.
Understood. Mr. Brooks, could you address the podium one more time, please? So it was your testimony earlier, I believe, that you have both of these lots under contract, the two lots, the rectangular lots behind the property that you own on Gervais?
I have the C3 lot known as 2225 Gervais Street under contract.
Mm-hmm.
If you skip to the black surrounded RG2 lot,
Mm-hmm.
I have that under contract. I also have a contract with the Verve fellow who owns the C3 lot, also facing Oak Street,
Mm-hmm.
to where I will swap the front half of the black line lot for his back half of his lot, so that he will end up with a line going from Gervais Street 46 feet wide by 135 feet up Oak, and I'll have the other half. I will not own property, as far as these lots are concerned, on Oak Street, and would not have access to Oak Street. He would own the entire parcel.
Right. And so that lot, how wide is that lot, that C3 lot, between the front's on Oak Street and goes behind the two other parcels?
6 feet wide. The commercial C3 lot, which is 1203, I think, is 26 by 104. And the black line lot is 29.
Did you look at the possibility of taking the existing C3 lot that's 26 feet wide and creating parking there without encroaching into the residential area?
Well, I think that's what somebody was asking me earlier to clarify that, and my answer to that is that would give me 106 feet. It would be the 80 feet and the 26, be 106 feet deep rather than 135 feet. And someone could build a building on that lot similar to what I propose. It would just be around 12, 1,300 square feet as opposed to 2,000.
No, but you mean you would have to incorporate the long lot and the lot that you're going to put the building on?
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, so you've got the 26-foot wide by
104.
104. That's the lot. You're already building on that in your site plan?
My building is only going to be on the 80-foot lot. That gridded, that black grid will be where the parking is.
Okay. So have you entertained the idea of just buying the 26 by 100 some odd foot commercial lot, incorporating that with the other lot that you have and trying to get the parking in that L-shaped configuration?
The fellow would not sell me the whole lot. He would sell me the back half.
Gotcha.
In other words, your question is, could I buy the 26-foot lot and have access out to Oak Street?
Understood. Okay. So you
If he would
can't.
sell it to me, that would solve the problem, and I could park on it without even being up here. But he'll only sell me the back half.
So he really probably doesn't intend to create a residential lot there.
Well, it's a C3 lot. If he did anything, he would expand his warehouse.
See, I still think that 7 spaces is too many for what you're trying to do.
You what?
I still believe 7 spaces just seems too many for this office. Or I don't know about too many.
That's what's
not
required by.
I understand that. So it brings me back to something I said earlier. It just seems like the more appropriate request would be a variance for the parking requirement for this parcel. I think you'd have an easier time arguing that than arguing, essentially effectively doing away with this residential parcel. I think the neighborhood would be better. I think the neighborhood would be fine with that. And I think I would be more comfortable with that. And I don't think, practically speaking, you need 7 spaces. Just a thought.
So we have a couple options here. We can either vote to defer your request. We can vote to approve it or deny it. And, I kind of agree, with what Gene just said, which was that perhaps this needs a little bit more thought before we actually do put a vote on it. That's my thought. But we'll do whatever you would like.
What does the deferment allow me?
Well, it allows you to think about what you're trying to do there. You could withdraw it after that point and then resubmit a different proposal. Or you could, say, well, this is really what I want to do, and come back and we vote on it again. Or we can vote on it now. If we vote on it today and it gets turned down, Rachel, and he wants to get a variance for the parking without the other thing, that wouldn't affect.
It would be a different
Right,
request.
different
It would just
request,
be
so
if
it
he
wouldn't
came
be,
back
it
with
wouldn't
the
be
same
affected
special
by,
exception.
if you wanted to come out a different angle, it wouldn't be affected by a no vote today.
That's the way I understand it as well. Whatever y'all want to do suits me.
Now you may approach Mr. Houston, sorry.
Thank you. No problem. I would like to reiterate the fact that we strongly oppose parking in this area that Mr. Brooks is speaking of. Parking there would open the door for other entities to then turn residential spaces into parking lot. The space that we are concerned about today, or that we're talking about today, is commercial and residential. The area that is wanting to be changed is a residential parcel of land. We oppose that residential parcel of land being converted into parking. That is the position of the community. And so we strongly ask that you do not grant this variance or this exception for parking. According to the map, we're the only community that has a protective area that is protected. And we as a community have a right to say what happens in our community. And we would like for you to respect the fact that this community opposes a parking facility on a residential parcel of land. We strongly oppose that because it will open so many doors that will destroy our community. We have the right to say that. And we ask that you please acknowledge our requests that this do not be granted.
Thank you, sir. Okay. want to do? Well, let's see what happens.
Why don't we defer it and not worry about it? And I do that out of the respect for the communities.
I make a motion that this matter be deferred.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Believe that motion carried.
All right, we're back to item number 6, which is case 2019-0025 for 2222 Rembert Street. The variance to the maximum lot coverage requirement for a detached garage. If the applicant has arrived, they're welcome to come forward.
Hey, how you guys doing? I'm planning to get.
Please state your name.
DeQuincy Edwards.
Quincy Edwards.
DeQuincy.
DeQuincy Edwards.
Okay. I'm planning to. I'm like 3% over the lot allowance for my home, and I'm trying to build a two-car detached on my property in Inwood Park on 2222 Rembert Street. And I've been working with the zoning downstairs, and I'm working with the design department upstairs, and I made it basically what the two-car garage is for is for parking. It's not really parking on my street. I would take away like a street park for me to park every night, and the neighbors use that a lot. So I'm trying to build a two-car garage so I can have personal parking on my lot. Also, the storage upstairs is just for me to store things because I made the garage as small as possible, so I'll take as much lot space as I need. So 2 cars could fit in there. So it's just a 20 by 20. That's the minimum I can do according to my architect for a 2-car garage. So I don't have any storage on the first floor. That's why I asked for the second level to be some storage for me to put some things in my garage. So I don't have to put it on my lot. It's not visible. It makes the not junk up the yard. The neighborhood still looks beautiful. People still use the street parking during the day, and I don't take away from that. I talked to the neighbors around me. Nobody had any problems with the 2-car garage. I think some people that work farther up the street use the street parking, so they was really happy that I won't take some of that street parking away. And I have like reduced the deck to a stoop as small as possible to make it work. I narrowed the house as possible to design center to make it work. I've done everything possible to get as much lot use as I can to get the building on there. Have any questions of me about the project? I'd be glad to answer them.
So, what are the, on your application, describe the extraordinary and exceptional conditions that are here?
We're talking about number 2?
Yes, so you mentioned that it was a narrow rectangular corner lot on Elmwood Park.
Yeah, when I first bought it, they presented to me as much bigger, so I didn't even run into this problem until after I closed. Then when my surveyor came out there, he cut the lot in half. They marketed it as .22, so I thought I had plenty area. Then he came back and said, no, it's actually .11. So that's when I ran into all this trouble and a narrow lot. That's why I had to change the whole design as much as the city allowed me to change the design on it. And that's why I'm saying that it was kind of near, because I think I have the smallest corner lot on that block.
So your written application is very well done, and I think it really explains your position on all of those. I'm not going to go through all those with you. Is there anyone else here speak in favor or against this application? See none. Are any questions from the board? Any discussion? I'd like to make a motion that we approve this request for a variance subject to all comments of staff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There is no other business today other than just welcoming our newest board member, Mr. Gregory.
Glad to have you aboard, John, and thank you very much.
Thank you, man.
All right. Make a motion that we adjourn. All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.